So my guest today is Kelley Steven-Waiss, who's the CEO of Hitch. And it's especially a pleasure to talk to you, Kelley, because you and I actually had a number of conversations about what you were trying to do with Hitch. You actually incubated it inside a big company here at Technologies when you were the CHRO. And you actually saw this potential for the way that people could think of human skills being matched up to the problems in organizations and to think of that as an enterprise resource. But pre-pandemic, would the average decision maker in an organization be open to those kinds of things? Maybe not as much. And then along comes a virus, and suddenly we had to become more adaptive and responsive to thinking about the ways that this much more distributed workforce was doing the work of the organization. So help people understand what Hitch is about and why you were passionate about starting this, and then sort of what you saw in the process of adapting to the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think, the idea for Hitch was incubated back in 2015 before internal talent marketplaces were a little more of a household name. And the idea was that we had the future of work was sort of in front of us, and the way that we were running a lot of our HR practices were not keeping pace with the questions and the big issues CEOs were asking for, particularly the movement around agile across an entire organization. And so I was really trying to solve that problem. How do we, people are getting bored in jobs, GDP's going down, engagement's going down, and yet technology is obsolescent. So something's wrong here. We have to fix this. So I started whiteboarding this solution long before the pandemic, and mostly because as a CHRO, I could connect a lot of these dots. But one thing became abundantly clear when I was, certainly still the CHRO, and we hit the pandemic, was that this conversation about what is this thing, internal talent marketplace, and what can it do for a company, and gig on the inside. Of course, I wrote the book, The Inside Gig, what is that about? Became much more of a conversation around the constraints that companies had with, oh my God, everybody's going remote. Now technology was going to be the great connector enabler. What is out there that can help connect us, that can help us know who's the right people to do the right work? Because there's no hallway chats, right? There's none of that human connection that we would just have in an agile fashion because we're all in the office. So the people that you always have first adopters that kind of got the agile way of working needed to move outside software and across the organization to now everyone's thrown in the deep end of the pool and needs solutions that work. And so that was the issue that really accelerated the pace of adoption. A more educated set of CHROs that are looking for answers to their CEOs saying, we got to run the company very differently. What are we going to do? And so that was really the genesis of Hitch taking off, was that everybody then became interested in more of this solutions for agile ways of working.
No, that's marvelous. So, and incidentally, if listeners hear construction sounds in the background, I'm sure that's the sound of people building a new future of work and learning.
Absolutely.
So in the Inside Gig, which I highly recommend to any of our listeners, you talk about this mindset shift to think of human talent as an enterprise resource. Can you walk people through why that's important? What's the challenge with the existing, especially hierarchical and structured organization? And what does that look like from the more agile and adaptive organizations that you've been working with in terms of thinking that as basically unlocking and a lot of that capacity?
So a lot of companies have, these resources called talent and skills that are underneath the surface. We don't know all the skills that these people have. So we're kind of sitting on talent gold that's underneath the surface. And we have had traditionally no way to excavate it, to make it visual. We make a lot of assumptions around what people can do based upon their job title today, but we really don't know what skills they have, what kind of work they could be doing. And so we go and we hire it constantly on the outside. We bring in contractors. Our answer has always been hire more people, when in fact we are sitting on much of the skill set we might be looking for. So that premise that we should just go hire it on the outside is no longer, certainly in some companies that were contracting even through the pandemic, they don't have that option. So we need to balance this supply and demand across the organization in a new way. And what the technology was enabling was a way to visualize a lot of that skills. So once your company gets over even 1,000 people, you can't possibly know the backgrounds that people have. And I would argue that a lot of skills come from life experience, not just professional experience. And teams are built not just on what competence, but how. What are the dynamics when you put that team together? And the technology we have today, and certainly what Hitch can do, is allow you to match in seconds, who are the right people against the right work. And this is a game changer. If you think about it, the human beings getting together and how biased that can be. Well, we think John can do it. Well, great. John, we keep tapping for the same stuff. So John's a little overworked. So now today we can actually not only surface all this capacity hidden below the surface, but we can engage people in new ways, and we can leverage that talent across in a more inclusive fashion than we have before.
No, absolutely. I mean, you talk about talent gold. In Next Rules of Work, I talk about I show a picture of an iceberg.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Just literally, you're hiring for this tiny little skill set, and yet there's all this capacity that not only the enterprise doesn't know about, but the individual often doesn't either. But if you're going to go and you're going to start a new product, and let's say it's focused on a new market like musicians, you suddenly find out we have so many musicians inside our organization. We could be doing focus groups with them before we even have to go out and look in the marketplace. And so you actually have this talent pool, this tremendous capacity that you don't know about and need to leverage. But you also need exactly the mechanisms you were talking about, which is how to help those humans to define the problem, dynamically bind around the problem, and move on to the next one. And there might be organizations, traditionally like consulting companies that can do that, but the average enterprise, that's not a skill set.
Yeah, it's also not one of the issues. The major issues is leadership mindset, right? I think that if we look at all the incentives and rewards that are set up for leaders and managers today, they have been to hoard talent versus to, maximize and optimize talent across the enterprise. And so the shift that needs to happen, and this isn't to be underestimated, right? It is an operating model shift, is a leadership mind shift, that talent is owned by the organization, not you as an individual manager. And if we kind of get that with when we inventory our product, right? No manager walks in, even if they're running a product, and says, I own all of the inventory in this company on this product. But when it comes to talent, that is the behavior, right? I have 50 heads and I own all of them, and thou shalt not poach any of my people. And it's actually quite counter, because when you think about the supply chain of talent in the organization, that the organization has goals and objectives, their revenue goals and, market competitiveness. And when you sit around a leadership table, you go, oh yeah, those are the things we need to achieve. But these are my people. So even if they could actually help the company achieve those objectives, I keep them in my backyard. And so what we have to change is when we open this up. So now how do we get companies to do this, right? When they realize that they can actually achieve more of those top objectives by talent sharing, that they have this capacity in a give and get model. I can not only give the talent away, but I can get talent into my organization in this model. Everybody wins. And so how have we gotten people to change this behavior is we've created a little bit of the FOMO effect of watching, monkey see, monkey do, right? Gee, that leader opened up his people to the organization and he's getting all this capacity. and his people are highly engaged, like, I'm missing out. I need to jump on the bandwagon. And that's how we've stimulated that change. And then we're addressing things like, what are the incentives and rewards? What are the communication? How do we keep the what's in it for me for leaders and, people entering the marketplace?
No, I think that's brilliant because I mean the leveraging, FOMO, fear of missing out, for a lot of people who lead in organizations is basically they have goals that they want to achieve, and if you have a scarcity mentality, as we talk about a lot at Singularity University, then what's going to end up happening is that hoarding process is going to have hard
Human
edges around
behavior.
it, and but that those hard edges keep out talent in the same way they keep it in. Right.
That's
That's why I show the picture of the traditional organization as a box, because that's the way we tend to manage those scarce resources. But an abundance mentality says there's an infinite amount of capacity inside our organization. We just have to learn how to tap it. And that has to be a skill set for the future. Now for you, talking about skill set, you went from being a CHRO to being a CEO. What was that transition like for you from a skill set? What's the overlap in skills? And then what are the new skills that you felt that you had to develop?
Yeah, I think as a CHRO, you have to have the perspective from so many different lines of business about what they're trying to achieve. You're the connective tissue, so you're really building the people strategy to serve all of those internal customers for a very top level goal, right? So you have to get the big picture. So that's similar about a CEO in that you have to have a big picture. But the difference is that as a CHRO, you're really serving your internal customers. When you cross the threshold to a CEO, you now have to have an internal focus and an external focus. So not only do you need to know how to move the chess moves, ahead in the internal ecosystem, but you have to know how to move those chess moves on your external ecosystem. What is the market? What business model are getting disrupted? What's the new thing out there? How do I maintain a competitive moat? And so your customers are internal and external now, and that kind of, you have to be able to split yourself in time that you spend on making sure you understand external dynamics as well as internal dynamics. And you also cannot be in 10 places at one time. So your time is extremely important to manage.
So unfortunately, our time is short today too. There's so many other questions I want to ask you, but let me ask you just one more, sort of about,
Sure.
the crystal ball looking down the road. So you focused a lot talking about unlocking the potential within organizations. That's a huge amount of work. Do you also think that eventually there will be more impetus for organizations to actually try to interconnect their
That's
talent
absolutely
pools
true.
so that they actually can find external talent as well, that they could just as easily be applying to the
Yeah.
problems of the organization?
I think that this is actually a real live issue, and I would have scared people when I was talking about my vision for this. I called it concentric circles, that we will start to share talent in a safe ecosystem of customers and partners, et cetera, that we deem safe. There's only so much supply of some of these skill sets. We know the shelf life of skills is 2 to 5 years. If you do the math, you go, there's no way I can just get all the talent at the right time unless I open up my thinking. And just like the pandemic, constraints force us into new thinking. And so where 5 years ago, if I walked into a company and said, you're going to start sharing talent, maybe with some frenemies, that people would freak out. But today we have the technology to enable this way of working. And a real live example that actually has socioeconomic benefit is that we have real examples where companies are having disruption. They're going to have to end of life something. They're going to have to let a lot of people go. Look what's happening in automotive with the combustion engine versus electric, the move from hardware to software. So we have to kind of open up thinking, or we're going to leave whole cities in despair. So some conversation that's going on in Germany right now is, gee, I'm a big employer. I have to let go of these skill sets. Could these be best used in another company? How can we start to link these two so we ensure the economic stability of a city and our economy as a whole. And so there's a lot of conversations about what platforms can we share, what talent we have, what openings exist that are outside our own company walls, and so our own industry even. So it's huge. It's coming.
No, absolutely. So, and I think this is where a lot of the potential in the future is to build that connective tissue that doesn't just benefit other organizations, but benefits the communities in which the organizations operate as well. So, again, I'm sorry our time is so short, but I just want to urge viewers, check out the book, The Inside Gig. It's really a tremendous resource. And you can find Kelley on LinkedIn. And absolute best of luck. I think you're doing a tremendous job in helping to actually unlock a huge amount of human skill inside the enterprise.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.